Good morning, Berwick Court School. What are you going to do today? Learn, enjoy, succeed. Welcome to Assembly. Today is Thursday, the 18th of June, and we have got 2 birthdays to celebrate today. Happy birthday to Apsra and happy birthday to Amber Ashwell, both of whom are going to be in school with us to celebrate their birthdays. You lucky girls. Let's sing them happy birthday, and I'm sure everybody will join in, especially the children in your group today. Happy birthday to you, happy birthday to you, happy birthday dear Apsra and Amber. Happy birthday to you. Have a wonderful day, girls. Mrs. Donnelly's Assembly, it must be time for a quiz. Right, 5 questions for you. Here we go. Are you ready? Number 1. Who wrote The Suitcase Kid? Some of you might know from the first clue. Do you know who wrote The Suitcase Kid? Well, it was the same person who wrote The Worst Thing About My Sister. Anyone read that? And if you're not sure, then this one will make it easier. The same person who wrote Tracy Beaker. Do you know who wrote those 3 books? All right, let's see what's next. Which country is famous for its canals, its Colosseum, and making pasta? Any ideas? Same country for all 3. Okay, question 3. What's the name of the river that flows through London? Here's your clue. It is the same river that flows through Windsor and Maidenhead, where we live. All right, number 4. Which theme park calls itself the happiest place on earth? Which theme park do you think is brave enough to suggest that it is the happiest place on earth? Okay, number 5. Can you name 3 of the animals in the Chinese Zodiac? So you might remember that we've talked about the story that the Chinese people would talk about at Chinese New Year, where the animals have to try and cross the river, and then each year the year is named after a different animal. Do you remember that story? So that's the Chinese Zodiac. Those are the animals that are the Chinese Zodiac. So I wonder if you can remember 3. Okay, got your answer? All right then. Okay, so today we're going to do the answers first instead of at the end. All right, so here we go. Who wrote The Suitcase Kid, The Worst Thing About My Sister, and Tracy Beaker? It was Jacqueline Wilson. Number 2. Which country is famous for its canals, its Colosseum, and making pasta? It is Italy. What's the name of the river that flows through London? The Thames. Which theme park calls itself the happiest place on earth? Disneyland. And number 5. Can you name 3 of the animals in the Chinese Zodiac? Well, I'll give you them all. Here we go. The rat, the ox, tiger, rabbit, dragon, snake, horse, goat, monkey, rooster, dog, and pig. Well done if you managed to get 3 of those. Did you know that 2020 is the year of the rat that we are in at the moment? And what you might like to look up is quite interesting. And I know that Evening Owls did this actually this year at Chinese New Year time, was to find out the year that you were born and what animal you are. So I am a rooster. And then you can look it up and it'll tell you something about what characteristics you might have. So that's quite fun. Okay, excellent. We're going to move on to what we're going to talk about for the rest of Assembly today. But what we are going to talk about is quite serious, and I want you to do some really good listening. So before we start, stand up. Make sure you have a little wriggle. Shake all your sillies out. Make sure that you are ready to listen. Okay, wiggle around. And then when you're ready, sit yourselves back down again. Okay, so we are going to talk about something that has been in the news a lot over the last couple of weeks. And when we do assembly, we really like, don't we, to make sure that we talk about current affairs, things that are happening in the world that are really important. And at the moment in the news, there's an awful lot of information and press about a movement called Black Lives Matter. And I think it's really important that you understand something about what that is. So that is what we're going to talk about today. And I'm really sorry that we can't all be in the same room together, because when you talk about something that's a very complex problem, the best thing that we like to do is to discuss it with everybody, isn't it? So that you can share your opinions and you can ask questions. And we can't really do that when I'm filming. But I'm still here. Look at me. I'm in school. I'm always in school. I'm always on the end of an email and on the end of a phone. So if anything comes up today and you would like to talk to somebody about it, you could talk to somebody at school, even if you're not at school. You could talk to somebody at home, or you could do both. So make sure that if you get to the end of this and you think, oh, I'd like to understand a bit more, or I've got some questions, or I've got an opinion that I'd like to share with somebody, please make sure that you do that, because that's really important with things like this. Okay, so we've had a look before at the Week magazine. This is last week's, all right? And this is their front page from last week, protests in America. People across the US call for justice, peace and equality. And you can see a picture there of some of the protests taking place. So this was in the United States of America. So the date here, look, is the 6th of June. So by the time you watch this video, that will have been a couple of weeks ago when all of this started, really. So here we go. This week's big news. This was their cover story. Protesters call for equality, peace and justice across the US. I wonder if you know what those words mean. I'm not sure that you do. You might do, but I'm going to make sure that you do by explaining them to you, okay? So equality is to do with being equal, everybody being treated in the same way and it being fair. Peace is to do with making sure that there isn't any fighting or violence. And justice is to do with, again, really fairness and making sure that the right things have happened to look after everybody and make sure that things are fair. Okay? Right, so I'm going to read you just a little extract from what it says. There have been a series of protests across the US in response to the death of a man called George Floyd. There's a picture of him here. People in the US and in other countries too are calling for justice, peace and equality. Why are people protesting? George Floyd, who is a black man, died on the 25th of May, shortly after he was arrested by a white police officer in the city of Minneapolis in the state of Minnesota. Floyd was treated violently by the police officer, who knelt on his neck, which made it difficult for him to breathe. The police officer has since been sacked, arrested and charged with murder because actually he leant on his neck for so long that George Floyd died. It's not the first time that police officers in the US have been accused of treating black people unfairly. Many of the protesters believe that this happened because of racism. So, one of the things I thought that you might be interested to know about was why the police officer wanted to arrest George Floyd in the first place. It didn't say in this article, but I looked it up for you. So George Floyd went into a shop that was near his house that he went to a lot, and he paid for something, and the banknote that he paid with was, and it says allegedly, that means that nobody's completely sure, but it might be that the banknote that he paid with was a fake. It wasn't real money. So when that happened, the person who owned the shop called the police, and the police went and found George Floyd, and they chased him, and they pushed him onto the ground, and they knelt on him so that he couldn't breathe, and then he died. So it's talking here about racism. And what that means is that sometimes people are treated unfairly because of the colour of their skin. So because George Floyd was a black person, the white police officer didn't treat him fairly. That is what people think happened. And then I thought, well, what we really need to know about is how often does something like that happen? So again, I looked it up and I've got the information here to show you. Black Americans, so remember, we're talking about what's happening in America now, not in England. So black Americans are 2.5 times more likely to be shot and killed by police officers than white people. So it's different in America anyway, because in England, very few police carry guns, and it's very, very rare that anybody would be shot. That does happen more in America because their rules are different. But in America, if you are black and American, you are 2.4 times more likely to be shot by a police officer than if you were white. And that is what people are starting to say is unfair. Because unfortunately, George Floyd isn't the first black American that this has happened to. And I imagine that's really difficult for you to understand, because in our community, in the area that we live in, and at our school, at Brawick Court School, we don't see people being racist. It isn't really something that happens. And I think that if it was happening, we would know about it, because we would hear it happen, or you would tell us that you had seen it happen. And if it does happen, we have to treat that very seriously. But in all of the time since we've been open, which is nearly 6 years now, we have to keep a record of all the times that it has happened. And there are 3 things ever that anybody said that were racist in the whole time since our school opened. And every time somebody had said something, they had never meant it to be hurtful. They just hadn't understood that what they'd said was racist. So I'm reasonably sure that within our school community, people aren't racist. But I still think it's important that you understand that in the world, some people are racist, and you need to understand what that means and where it might have come from. So I thought, how am I going to explain this to you? Because it's actually a really tricky concept. So here's my idea. If you were sitting outside having a picnic and a wasp came along, what would you think about that wasp? Well, I tell you what I would think, and I've tried to think of something where everybody would have the same view, and I think we've probably all got the same view of wasps, really. So my view of wasps is, oh no, I hate wasps, because this wasp is not here for any good reason. This wasp is only here to try to steal my picnic and to sting me. This wasp is going to cause nothing but trouble, and it's going to hurt me, and I want this wasp to go away. And even though I am a person that would never want to hurt anybody or anything, I might try to bat that wasp away with something, or I might trap it under a glass so that it can't get out. And I might be mean to that wasp. Now, that isn't really very fair, because this is a creature just like all other creatures. But at the same time, we are right to be scared of wasps a little bit, aren't we? Or to be cautious of them, because sometimes they do sting people, and that's not very nice. The thing with racism is that some people believe something mean like that about other people. And the only reason they believe that is because of the colour of their skin. So that police officer hadn't ever met George Floyd. He didn't know anything about him. He didn't know whether he was a kind and good person, or whether he was a person who was mean or bad or dangerous. But he made a judgment about him because of the way that he looked. So there are people in the world who might look at another person and automatically feel a real hatred towards that person just because of the colour of their skin. And that is such an awful thing that it's really important that we tackle it, because that won't be fair. Now, I would say that in some ways, people who believe those things and are racist, not all of it is their fault. Some of that comes from, that has got to be somebody else's opinion that that person has learnt. So somebody in their life has told them that horrible thing. somebody has told them not to like people just because of the colour of their skin. So it might have been their families, it might have been their teachers at school, somebody within their lives and within their community, somebody on the telly, all of these different influences on people's lives has given them an unfair and incorrect view. So when you think that that is happening, I think you can begin to understand why racism is such an important thing and why people feel so strongly and passionately and feel that it has to be tackled. And what happened to George Floyd, you might call that a catalyst. It sped up or made things happen more about this problem that is happening in the world. So that was going back a couple of weeks when that was happening in America. And then actually similar things started to happen in England. People decided that they were as cross about what had happened and as concerned about racism in England as people were in America. And so this week, in The Week magazine, they have reported about something else that's been happening in our country. In England, it says thousands join protests calling for an end to racism. So what happened in the UK? In the UK, around 137,000 people demonstrated in cities including Bristol, Cardiff, Glasgow and London. Is there racism in the UK today? Now that's an interesting question that they've asked here, isn't it? Because what we were talking about in the first magazine article, this was happening in America. So are these people protesting because this is happening because of what happened in America? Or are they actually protesting because they also think that similar things might be happening in our country? Well, this is what it says. Racism still exists in the UK. Black people in England and Wales are 9.5 times more likely to be stopped and searched by police than white people. And black people are 5 times more likely to have force against them used by police. Many people believe there is inequality, so that means that things aren't fair in education, health, and at work. One London protester said, "People out here showing support is a great step, but there is still so much more that can be done. People still need to educate themselves." So people feel so strongly about what's happened that they wanted their voice to be heard and for people to understand that racism is not okay and that it should be stopped. And people have done that in a variety of different ways. One of the ways they've done that is that they've protested. So this picture here is in Brighton. So all of these people have come out, and this was a very peaceful protest. This was actually a silent protest. And also, look, if you have a look, these people followed all of the social distancing rules. They have got their masks on and they are keeping some distance between them and the people around them, but they felt it was important that everybody could see that they believed in this cause and that something needed to be done about it, and make that very visible by going out and protesting in the street. Now, I do want to talk a little bit about the protests because that has been a bit of an issue. So some people have decided, like I said, that it's important for their views to be heard and for people to understand that they don't think that the racism that's been happening is okay. But the ways in which they've chosen to voice their opinions have varied quite a lot. So some people, this is outside the Houses of Parliament in Westminster, and as you can see, loads and loads and loads of people have come out to protest. But what happened there was so many people came along that actually they got really squashed together. So this is powerful, isn't it? Because you can see there, every single one of these people has come out to protest because they think that racism isn't fair and should stop. And I absolutely agree with that, because racism isn't fair and it definitely should stop. But it did get a little bit tricky because there were too many people, and some of those people weren't peaceful in the way that they protested. So the police had to be there to make sure that everybody was safe, but a small amount of the people who were there were violent, and so they pushed and they hurt other people. And so even though the cause that they were fighting for was a really good cause, they didn't really make a good choice in the way that they expressed their views. So this was from last week's paper. This is my friend. He's called Ben, and he is in the Metropolitan Police, and he has been up in London helping to try to make sure that everybody is safe during the protests. But he's had a really difficult time because unfortunately some of the people who have been protesting have been violent and other people have got hurt. So this is another police officer there, look, who's been hurt by some of the protesters. So although that the cause that they're protesting about is absolutely correct, actually some of those people haven't gone about that in a very good way. But there are lots of other things that have happened recently where lots of people over the last couple of weeks have made their views heard in all kinds of different ways that I think have been a lot more positive. So I wonder if any of you watched this extract from Blue Peter. Blue Peter, you can find this online if you want to. This is a screenshot from a video where Blue Peter and lots of other programmes as well, but Blue Peter's a good one for you because it's aimed at children, have talked about their experiences. So two of their presenters who are not white, are from mixed heritage, or from different backgrounds or different colour skin, have talked about the fact that in their lives they have experienced racism. They feel that people have been mean to them or treated them unfairly just because of the colour of their skin. So it has meant that it's brought the issue to people's attention, so they're thinking about it a lot more, which is a good thing, isn't it? That's a really good thing. Here's another example of what's happening, look. So the Premier League is about to start back up, and what the Premier League have decided is that for the first 12 matches, on the back of every player's shirt where it would normally say their name, instead it's going to say Black Lives Matter, to show their support for the cause against racism and to show that they all believe that black lives do matter. So that's another really positive way of getting the message out there that actually we don't agree with racism and we do believe, of course, that everybody's lives matter, including black people. So here's a good question. Is it working? Have the protests and the things that have been in the press and the media, all the people who've written on social media, all the people who've been interviewed for the news and for newspapers, all of the TV shows that have covered this, is it actually making any difference? Well, it's starting to. It's a really big problem. It's been going on for hundreds of years. It's not going to be fixed overnight, but I think the amount of coverage that it's getting at the moment is making people think about this more than they would normally do, and thinking about the problem and thinking about what they can do to help to solve it. Because with a big problem that can involve everybody, like racism, then it's really important that everybody realises that they've got a part to play in stopping this from happening. So, what can we do about it? There is definitely something that every single person can do, and this is an important thing for us to think about, I think, and one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you about it, because it's important for you to understand what other people think and what's going on in the world, but it's also important for you to understand that you can have a part to play in this to stop racism. So, what are we doing as a school? Well, I've done lots of reading and lots of research and finding out. And one of the things that I read really struck a chord with me. So this is it. This is from Twitter. This is from, and it says, teachers. Students don't need a special one-off lesson on Black Lives Matter. They need a curriculum and a school that clearly demonstrates this consistently and continually. And I absolutely believe in that. I think you do need a one-off lesson like your assembly today to explain it to you and to make sure that you're aware of it. But more important than that, what this is saying is what I can't do is talk to you about it once and then tick a box, say that we did that, never talk about it again. What's really important is that we make sure that everything that we teach you in school makes sure that we all understand and believe that everybody is equal and that everybody should be treated fairly. and that when we look at history, we look at the history of people from all kinds of different races and creeds and cultures, and not just white people who come from England. And that when we look at what's happening now, we think about people from all kinds of different backgrounds and faiths and races, to make sure that we are treating everybody fairly, and that we think that everybody deserves their chance for us to listen to stories from the countries that they come from, to celebrate the festivals that they might celebrate in their houses, to think about the history and the culture and the geography of their countries, not just about our country now, because the best thing that we can do for you is to make sure that you are educated enough to understand and to celebrate people of all kinds of different backgrounds. So we're working really hard on that as a staff team. We've been developing our curriculum anyway, and we're going to develop it even further to make sure that it is as equal and fair to everybody as it possibly can be. And we might be asking you to help us with that as we go along. So something else that we're doing is that we would always make sure that we do not stand for racism. We don't talk about racism very often, but what we do talk about a lot is bullying. And I know that I've been very clear with you in the past that bullying is not accepted at Braywick Court. Well, racism is not accepted at Braywick Court either. And the action that we would take against racism would be very similar to the action that we would take against bullying. So if we felt that anybody had been racist towards somebody else, then we would have a very strong conversation with that person. We would speak to their family about it, and we would have to record and report on that. So that would go on that person's record, on that child's record, and also on our school record. And then more important than that, and the same as we would do with bullying, what we would also make sure of is that that person understands why what they did or said was wrong, because it is our job to teach you to get it right next time. So we would work with that person to make sure that that's what happens. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. What are you going to do? Okay, well, here's the first thing. Have you ever heard this phrase? Never judge a book by its cover. Well, this phrase isn't only talking about books. What it's talking about is not making a judgment or thinking a certain thing about a person or a book or anything else by the way that it looks on the outside, but thinking very carefully about what's on the inside. So that is the same for people as it is for books. So the first thing that you can do is you can make sure, have a think about your behaviour and your views and attitudes, and make sure that you are being completely fair to every single person, and you are never influenced by thinking something about what that person might be like just because of the colour of their skin. And as long as you're doing that, that will help you to make sure that you are not being racist in any way, either on purpose or by accident. Okay, here's the next thing that you can do. In a world where you can be anything, be kind. And this is one of our school values, isn't it? Caring and kind. And this is really important, and you all do it all of the time, but it is always worth remembering. You need to always be caring and kind to absolutely every person. They might have a view that's different to yours. You might not like something about something that they do or the way that they act, but we will still be caring and kind to every single person. And then in addition to that, you need to make sure that you are not making any judgments about those people based on something that they can't do anything about. For example, the colour of their skin. I know that you're not going to, but I also think it's just important that we've made that point really clear, because it's such an important topic in the world at the moment. The last thing I'm going to ask you to do is the hardest thing, but I think that you can do it, and I think that it's really important that you can do it. So when I have done a lot of reading and research about the Black Lives Matter movement and what people have been doing to express their views and what people believe that other people should do and how we can make sure that we stamp out racism, What they're saying is that absolutely the first thing that everybody should do is to be kind and to not be racist in any way, to not say anything or do anything that is mean about anybody else. But more than that, you need to be active. You need to be anti-racist. So if you hear in your life anybody say anything that you think is mean or unfair or judgmental about another person, I think you need to be brave enough just to say to them very politely, I'm really sorry, but I disagree with your view. I think that that is unkind and that you shouldn't say things like that about other people. Because racism is only going to stop if every single one of us stands up and makes it stop. It might not be the right thing to go out and protest or to make your views heard in other ways, but that's a tiny thing that you can do that would make a really big difference. If you heard somebody saying something that you feel is racist or mean or unkind in any way, then you should stand up for what you believe in. And you should say to them, I don't agree with you. I think you're wrong. And I think you need to stop saying things like that. Because that is the way, the only way that we're going to get people to stop. We're not going to do a song or anything to finish today. I am just going to ask you to spend 1 minute of your time thinking about some of the things that I've talked to you about today, because there have been some very important points and some very tricky things as well. So we're just going to have 1 minute. I don't want you to pause or stop the video or walk away. I would like you to sit quietly and have a think about the fact that we have talked about people being racist in this country and in other people in the other countries, that sometimes people aren't treated fairly and that is not okay, and that it's all of our responsibilities to be able to stop that. Maybe you would think about whether you think you've ever seen that happening, or what you might do to try to make things better from now. So we're just going to have a minute to stop and think. Thank you for listening so carefully today. And just like I said at the beginning, if there's anything that we've talked about today that's worried you or upset you, or that you have questions about, or things that you're not sure about, it's really important that you talk to an adult about that. So you can talk to anybody that you trust in your house. You can talk to anybody that you trust at school, and that could be somebody that you're seeing. You could send us an email, you could phone us. There's all kinds of different ways that we can get in touch with you, but there are always people that can help. So if there's anything here that has upset you or worried you, then please make sure that you come and talk to somebody about it. I am absolutely convinced that Braywick Court is a really positive place where everybody is treated equally. And the only reason we're talking about this today is to make sure that you understand how important that is to us and as part of our school values, and that will never ever change. Thank you very much for listening.